Oh, hi guys, how are you? I know it's been a while since I did a video. I have to explain a little something. I got a little bit of an under the weather last Sunday. It was right after our vacation Bible school picnic. The picnic was awesome, by the way. I got to show the kids a couple little tricks and treats and had a great time. And in fact, it was right after that, as we were just about to leave, when a church member, she asked me if I was okay. And I said, yes, ma'am, I am. And she said, are you sure? She said, you don't look like you're feeling good. And I said, I feel fine. Lo and behold, a few hours later, I didn't feel fine. And in fact, about 11 o'clock that night, my husband's like, honey, I said, I think I'm having a kidney stone. Because it was just, if you've ever had a kidney stone, you know, they don't give you a warning. They don't say, hey, we're going to come tomorrow at such and such time, or we're going to go on such and such day. You know, they don't give any warning. It's just like, bam, you know, and it hits you like right your lower quadrant, and, you know, on my hip. This time it hit my left side, and I thought, okay. So my husband called an ambulance, and before the ambulance got there, I said, Lord, what is the purpose of this kidney stone? How do I keep getting these kidney stones? May this excursion be the reason, you know, it explains what I'm doing to get these stones and stuff. And which I have to back up, because I had kidney stones back in 2020, before COVID. And the doctor said I had clusters. I had a whole, like a grape cluster up in the upper part of my kidneys. And he said that they haven't come down yet. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's been over 5 years since I've had kidney stones. I thought I was doing really good, and I was drinking my water. See, I'm drinking my water, and eating right and everything. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but the lifestyle change has been working. I actually lost 35 pounds since February, and according to the doctor, another 4 pounds today. Woo! I'm so excited about that. But anyway, I'm kind of getting sidetracked. But anyway, he called the ambulance, and the ambulance came in, and they're just kind of like, they got me on the stretcher, got me in the ambulance, and that crew was they weren't mean, but Miss Kathy likes to smile and make more people at ease, even though I'm laying there going, oh, okay. And I was in a whole lot of pain, and they were just we're going to take your blood pressure, we're going to take your temperature, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this, we're going to work up this, and we're going to work da. And they got me to the hospital, got me into the room, and by the time they got me into the emergency room thing, the young lady, she finally smiled, and she said, Miss Kathy, it was a pleasure bringing you in. May God take care of you. And I said, thank you so much. And then I got to work with a student nurse, and she's like, I get to work you up, and and I said, okay. And I said, I hope you have a long career. And I got to chit chat with her, and because of course they can't give you any pain medicine until they have a CAT scan. So they did the CT scan, which, yep, and I got a kidney stone. And then they said, well, we're waiting on the doctor to come in and see if it can, if you can pass it or not, or whatever. Because by that, right after the CT scan, they gave me an IV to start pushing fluids, because you have to be able to pee it out. And it was gonna smart. They said if you pass it, it's gonna passing a kidney stone is not an easy thing. And I said, I know, so they're doing the IV fluids. The more fluids you have intake and stuff, a little bit easier it is, the faster it'll go through your system. Well, 3 o'clock in the morning, because, this was 11 o'clock at night when I got there, and by 3:30 I was up in the room. But before that, the doctor came in about 3 o'clock in the morning. And guys, I have to tell you something. I love my husband very much. He cannot drive. And I thought he was going to go wake up one of the neighbors and ask them to bring him, because I know I have wonderful neighbors. They would have gotten up and taken him and dropped him off. My husband walked all the way from home to the hospital, the 4+ miles to the hospital. I'm like, okay. So he came in and sat down and was waiting and waiting and waiting. And we're like, okay. Well, like I said, getting back to 3 o'clock in the morning, the nurse says, well, we're waiting on the doctor to come in and see what, waiting out the CAT scan and stuff. This young kid, I says, you're the doctor? And he said, yes, ma'am. I said, you're only 19 years old. What are you doing as a doctor? And he laughed. He goes, thank you, Miss Kathy, for making me feel better. He smiled and he said, no, I'm a little older than that. And I said, a little by how much? He said, oh, I'm 29. I'm like, wow. He must have went right to med school right after high school, because he was only 29. And I said, well, and my personality got to jovial, and he just said, Miss Kathy, if I hadn't seen the CAT scan to know you got a 5mm stone in there and know it's going to be painful for you, I wouldn't have thought you were sick. I said, oh, trust me, I know I'm sick. So we got to laughing about it, and I said, well, he said, well, unfortunately, Miss Kathy, because it's a 5mm stone, you're going to have to stay in the hospital to pass it, because you got to have lots of IV fluids. I said, okay. I was hoping to pass it by myself, with all the fluids. So they said, we're gonna put you up for the night, upstairs. So they admitted me about 3:30, and so I said, okay. But I said, Doc, before we go, can I have prayer with you? And he goes, yes, ma'am. I'll never turn down prayer. So I got to pray with him, the student nurse, just in the emergency room, and the other nurses there. Then I got upstairs, and the nurse, was there. He's like, the nurse says, I'm going to be your nurse for the night, blah, blah, blah. I'm the charge nurse, et cetera, et cetera. I said, okay. And they hooked up the IV to me and finally gave me some pain medicine. And I thought, okay, I can relax a little bit. And I'm thinking, I'm going to pass this by the morning, because they kept, they were pumping the fluids in me. Well, the next morning, Dr. Daniel came in, and he said, Miss Kathy, I am so sorry. He said, there's no way you're going to pass this stone on your own. He said, it's blocking your ureter, so you have to have surgery. I'm like, oh, here we go. And he said, it'll be scheduled for Tuesday. So you can't eat anything or drink anything after midnight tonight. And I'm like, okay. And even then, they had me on a clear liquid diet, because the more liquids that you could take, the better chances of you passing it. But that's before they've realized that it was blocking, so I had to have the surgery. So I still had to stay on a liquid diet. And so I'm like, okay. So I'm there, and I'm waiting, and I'm kind of just trying to get some sleep. But when you're in the hospital, they come in and do your blood pressure and take blood, and they check your vitals, and they move you around, and they try not to wake you up. But I scared that charge nurse on Monday night's shift, or the wee hours of that morning, half to death, because I can relax when I know that I'm going to be here. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to relax and go to sleep as much as I can, and try to just get through this pain. And he woke me up, and I jumped like, whoa. And he's like, oh, Miss Kathy, don't do that. You scared me half to death. I said, me? I said, oh. And he said, so I'm like, okay. So he apologized and stuff. But when he came in the second or third time, because each time I jumped, and that's, again, part of the CP, my nervous system, you can go, and I'll jump, and because my little brother Scotty used to do it to me all the time. He'd come up behind my ear and go, and I'd jump just to see me jump. But, so he said he apologized and so on and so forth, but he put in the fall risk, which I knew meant I was not going to get out of bed without 2 nurses or 3 nurses on each side of me and stuff like that. Of course, I didn't have my walker with me anyway. So I'm like, oh, okay. And so they kept me in bed majority of the day Monday, and then the afternoon shift came in, and that was another story. they wanted me to get up out of bed, and I said, I can't. They put me in a room that wasn't handicapped accessible. I said, I can't get in that bathroom. Because they brought in a walker, but it wasn't big enough for the walker, let alone for me, let alone the 2 nurses that were helping me because I was a fall risk. So I was like, okay, I don't know what you're going to do. And they said, oh, well, we'll bring up a bedpan. Yeah. It wasn't until after my surgery they brought up the bedpan. I mean, the commode, the bedside bed, the bedside commode thing. But I was able to witness and stuff, and every time they got me up out of bed to go potty, seems like it was right after they gave me the pain meds, and that made my legs feel like jello. And I'm just like, this isn't working. But I had my surgery on Tuesday, and it's called lipsotrypsin, where they zap it and stuff. And then the doctors, my husband was there, and a church member stayed with him while at the waiting room with him. And my husband said, honey, when I came out of the surgery, he says, honey, you're not going to believe this. I'm like, what? There was no stone? He goes, no, they got the 5mm stone. Plus he was able to grab a few others. I'm like, oh, that's why I feel like I've been roto-rooted. He said, yep. So I stayed Tuesday. I stayed all day Wednesday. And then I stayed Thursday at the hospital till about 4:30, 5 o'clock before I could get home. So I was plumb tuckered out, and I apologize that I didn't get a video out because I didn't feel that it was proper to do a video in the hospital. And I didn't want to scare you guys half to death with the oxygen mask. I don't know why they gave it, the oxygen, and because my asthma, they said that because I'm asthmatic and stuff, the anesthesia would make me cough more, so they kept giving me breathing treatments and stuff like that, and I think that's why I had to stay a little bit longer. But I am so glad to be home, and I feel almost 95% better, 100%. I'm almost back to my old self again, but the good Lord has been watching over us. And today was the first day I got out, and because I had to go back to the doctor and have a check from them, and so that's what's going on here. A day in the life of Miss Kathy. Okay, a week in the life of Miss Kathy. But I got to pray with a lot of people. I got to pray with Dr. B, Dr. Daniel, and I had a roommate, and so I got to pray with her, and I was crocheting something. I'm always crocheting. Well, this is going to be a Swiffer mop, reusable Swiffer mop. I'm going to get it done, but right now it's just the first row, and I have to do 11 more rows. Anyway, when I was making a little doily, I wanted to make a water bottle cover for this, and I had it about up to here, and the Lord nudged me, just finish it off and give it to your roommate. So I said, okay, and I finished it off on Thursday morning, and her and I both left Thursday. She left about an hour and a half before I did, so I was able to finish that. And I said, I know this isn't much of anything. I said, but, maybe you could put, set it on your nightstand, put your keys in it, or, something. I said, just something, a little reminder, and to know that I'm praying for you. And she appreciated it, and her husband appreciated it. And, I just used that time to be praying for a lot of people. When I tell you, I pray for you. And I mean, I really pray for you. Every time I look at a video and I go, oh, there's only 15 views this time. Or there's, 696. That means there's 696 people that I need to pray for. Or there's 1,000K videos on my little short ones. I think, Lord, you know who they are and what they need. If you need prayer, please give me a thumbs up, an emoji, or just say, please pray. You don't have to tell me the whole thing, but if you want to say, I need prayer for XXY and Z, please go ahead and leave it in the comments. And my husband and I will pray for you. All right? Take care of yourself and drink your water. Make sure you stay hydrated, okay? No matter what you're doing and where you're at. And remember, God, He is the living water. Okay? Take care of yourself. God bless. And thank you for your patience. And maybe I'll do another video on Friday. All right? I'll talk at you later. God bless now. Bye-bye.